welcome to the March episode of Historified. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Annie.
And on today's episode, we are going to be discussing what we feel are possibly endangered structures in McKinney. Now, we're not saying they are endangered, but these are structures that we are keeping our eye on, that we're really hoping will be preserved.
Yes.
And saved if there is a threat to them. And maybe start the conversation in our McKinney community of these historic home structures, places that we should continue to honor and preserve for generations to come.
Because that's what we do.
That's right.
Preserve history so that future generations can come and learn about the past.
And it's part of what makes McKinney unique.
Yes,
right?
Definitely.
Unique by nature, let's not forget our roots.
Exactly, we need to remember. So we have two that we're going to talk about today. And the first one I think is just amazing. It is the Elm Street Saloon. And I was researching this, and so I want to give credit where my notes came from. Bill Haynes is a researcher or a historian here in McKinney, or he was, and he did a lot of looking into the Elm Street Saloon, and so that's where most of this comes from, and then some of it comes from newspaper clippings that I found online. But at one point, the Elm Street Saloon was one of the most famous places in North Texas in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So we have that right here in McKinney, and it originally started next to the courthouse, and then it moved to its current location on East Virginia Street. And it's been known as the Rockfront Saloon and the Old Rock Saloon. So if you look at it, it kind of changed over the years, and they built, and it's a rock sculpture building now. So it's very interesting. It does have a Texas historical marker. That means that it's very important in history. Mm-hmm. It is actually harder to get a Texas historical marker than to get a national historic marker.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just learned that at a class. So, Jamie, who is famous for visiting the Elm Street Saloon that everybody should know?
And it's funny because this was actually on our trolley tours.
Yes.
Several years it's been on and off of our trolley tours. But that would be Frank James, the brother of Jesse James. Now, I'm not saying that Jesse didn't visit, but Frank James actually got in trouble at the Elm Street Saloon, so we happen to know for a fact that he was there.
Yes. And what did he get in trouble for?
Well, he basically had some words with a gentleman, and some said spittoon was involved.
Oh, yes. And it was cracked upside the head of said gentleman. So he got to stay the night, Frank James got to stay the night in the, what do they call it, the hospitality suite?
At the historic Collin County Prison.
Yes.
Which is on Tennessee Street.
Yes. So that is interesting history. So the Elm Street Saloon originally was established in 1880, and then it was moved in 1883 to its current location by T.O. Bauer. And then in 1886, J.B. Howell owned it, and he sold the lot and the building to J.R. Parker. And at that time, it was a 2-story building, and it was labeled a saloon. Now, somewhere in 1892, it suddenly was described as a 1-story building. And James West, our local lovely historian that we just love to death, had said that at one time it faced east toward the train depot. So it was moved over there specifically to catch the train people who were coming off.
That makes sense.
So that they could come and get, some libation.
Get some liquor.
Get some liquor. So it was known as the not desirable part of town to go visit if you were like a young lady by yourself. You wouldn't want to walk over to the Elm Street Saloon because the rough and tumble, cowboys would hang out there. It is the only rock building in McKinney in 1920. I don't even know if there are any rock buildings. It might be the
only one now?
Yeah,
That'd
still.
be interesting to look up.
Yeah. And in 1902, Prohibition happened, and that kind of got rid of all the saloons in McKinney.
We had a lot of saloons.
There were
at
13 at one time.
So only?
There were 13 saloons at one time here in McKinney. So this building has seen a lot of history. Mm-hmm. I think one of the gentlemen that I read, he has a business next to it. They actually dug bullets out of the walls.
Okay.
At one point in time, and this was like way back, and he said that he didn't know what their significance was, so he threw them away. Oh. But this was I know. It was back in the 70s and 80s. But yeah, so that must have been a rough and tumble place if there were bullets in the wall.
That's crazy. I mean, yes. You should be surprised, but It's still crazy to hear about that.
Yeah.
And again, we're not saying that the Elm Street Saloon is in any threats to be demolished or anything. But the fact is we know, the whole community knows. It's just been sitting there. It's vacant. And we just had this new municipal, City Hall building across the street that was built. And so you can't help but question, what's going to come about the Elm Street Saloon.
Right.
And
so we want to, I would love to have it someplace here on our property.
It would be great to be able to bring it over
here. Yes,
it
would be. It would be. Just kind of.
We don't really have a lot of room on the 2 blocks that we have right now. But we do know ways that we could probably make room.
We could make room.
So, yes.
That's my wanting to, that would be in my dream world to have it here on property.
There's a lot of people on the staff that would love to see it here. And so that would be, it's just important to keep the conversation going. I do see it brought up a lot on the McKinney groups on social media. So it's nice to see that. Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, what's going on with it? Who owns it? Is it for sale? Whoever does own it, I hope that they're very mindful when the time comes that they do sell and who they sell it to. And I don't know.
Or donate it to.
Right. Donate it to Chestnut Square. But I just think and I know you do too, we think it's very, very important that we keep the conversation going, right? And we rally behind as a community for these historic places, such as the Elm Street Saloon, so we can preserve it for generations to come. There is nothing left really
like that
time.
No.
We've got similar buildings, sure, but this one, there's so much history.
Right. And it's unique. So again, we can keep McKinney unique by history.
Yeah. And I know it's loved in the community.
Yes.
Everybody loves it. And even though probably most of us have never even been inside of it, we all love it so much because we recognize the importance. We recognize the history. We recognize our roots.
Right.
So I think that that's really, really important.
Yes.
So the second building we're going to bring up, again, we're not saying, I feel like I have to stress this all the time, right?
Yes.
We're not saying that this building is in any present day danger, but again, with just some of the recent events of a passing of a gentleman, this house, which has been on our radar for a while, has kind of become a little stronger on our radar because we're not quite sure what is going to happen to the home. And that would be the E.W. Kirkpatrick House.
Yes, and that it is on South Parker Street. It is a lovely, lovely home that is truly turn of the century. It was built in 1900 by E.W. Kirkpatrick.
Elbert Wiley Kirkpatrick.
Elbert.
Elbert.
A name you don't hear anymore.
You don't. Bring it back.
And one of the reasons that it is so important is because it has stayed in the Kirkpatrick family since it was built. It was passed down to children, and the latest family descendant that has been in it just passed away, and he was a great historian and loved the history of McKinney, grew up in McKinney, was J. Crum, but his mother, Martha Wade Crum Schubert, who also was a great historian in McKinney. She actually was one of the people that started the Heritage Guild and started Chestnut Square.
That's right.
So she grew up in that house as well. And then her mother was Alice Kirkpatrick Wade, and Alice was the daughter of E.W. Kirkpatrick. Okay. That's just so neat that the land and the house have stayed in one family since the early 1900s. Yeah. That's amazing to me. So it was built from cypress trees that were hauled from Jefferson, and the farmland, it's part of the farmland in the Texas Land Heritage Program. And the house has a historic landmark, a Texas historic landmark.
People know the house, know the property. It has the barn on it. I think they still might have. I'm
not sure. It's okay. Right next to Finch Park.
Mm-hmm. So this is a very well-known house in the area, and there's so many significant reasons why the structure should be saved, why it should be preserved, and hopefully, I know I'm personally hoping, I think you are too, as well as James West, who we've mentioned in many of our podcasts. You know, we're really hoping that it's going to be a home that's going to be open to the community, right? A way to continue teaching history, and for families, for generations to come to see the house, see what it's about. Because it's more than just a house, right? It was somebody's home, but also the Kirkpatrick House, E.W. Kirkpatrick, is actually very significant himself. He, and I am going to read off my phone because there's a lot that this man has accomplished, a lot. So I am sorry, I am reading straight from the interweb, but you can't beat this information. So Albert Wiley Kirkpatrick, he was born in 1844. And they actually moved from Whitesburg, Tennessee, and they moved to White's Grove in Collin County in 1854, the same year our Ferris house was built. So the elder Kirkpatrick, he had died about a year later, and Albert actually, at 13 years old, was the head of the family.
Wow.
And so he took charge of the family farm, and he handled all the affairs. In 1862, he left White's Grove to enlist in the Confederate Army. That's just what you did when you lived in Texas. And for 3 years, he served as a private. He fought in 8 battles in Arkansas and what they say Indian Territory, which I believe is Oklahoma, right? Back then, that's what it was, and was wounded at the Battle of Cabin Creek in Indian Territory. Now, after the war, Kirkpatrick returned home to manage the family farm, and he taught in the first public school in Collin County in 1872.
That's so cool.
And he and for 2 years, and he was also a land surveyor. So wait, there is so much more. Okay. So during this period, he began experimenting with plants, and eventually he originated or introduced 12 varieties of fruits and nuts, including the English blackberry, and forgive me if I say it wrong, and the Benge black walnut to Texas. He's considered one of the fathers of Texas horticulture.
And if you happen to see our live when we were talking about the Possum Tater Club, he also is the one that had the persimmon tree that supplied all the persimmons for the Possum and Tater Club dinners. That's pretty cool.
That is
We've
really,
come around,
really neat.
yeah.
His increasing interest in horticulture resulted in his establishing a nursery at White's Grove in 1874. I know he had one in Sherman at one time as well. He was instrumental in founding the Central Texas Pomological and Horticultural Association, the Texas State Nurserymen's Association, and the Texas Nut Growers Association. There's so much more. I'm telling you. He served as president of the latter two organizations, and then he moved from Whites Grove to McKinney in 1887. And there he ran his own nursery and served as president of the Whitesboro Orchard and Fruit Company. I'm gonna not get this name right, the pronunciation, the Nueces Land and Immigration Company. It's hard to know when you don't hear it. Mm-hmm. And the Texas Nursery Company. He was also on the board of directors of the Durant Nursery Company, the Collin County Mill and Elevator Company, the New Century Milling Company, and the Burris Milling Company, which the Burris Milling I think is where Tups is right now.
Okay.
Or is that? Because I think I could be wrong. I might be switching them.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that's where there was a Sun Company as well, but I'm not sure.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
So in 1908, he was elected president of the Texas Industrial Congress and served as vice president of the Texas State Fair Association. Wow. But wait, there's more! In the early 1920s, he served as chairman of the McKinney Chamber of Commerce Agricultural Committee. And during World War I, he was a member of the State Council of Defense and the State Food Conservation Organization, as well as country chairman of the YMCA War Fund Committee. And although he had no formal education, he was a successful writer. He wrote some 25 articles for the horticultural journals and edited the McKinney Democrat. He also rose to the rank of lieutenant general, we were talking about this, in the Trans-Mississippi Division of United Confederate Veterans. So you were just looking this up.
Yes, because I had heard that he was a general having to do something with the Civil War, but he didn't rise to that rank until after he was part of the Veterans Association.
So it wasn't an official of the Army,
right,
or of the branch of the general, but he was given that title for the veterans. So he was very involved, and we're going to touch on that in a minute. So yes, he was also a Mason, an Odd Fellow, and a Rotarian.
Yes.
Rotarian. And he's also, he's responsible for bringing a lot of trees to Texas. And then we found out after reading all this, I found out a while ago, and then I just refreshed my memory by looking this up. But not only was he considered one of the fathers of Texas horticulture, but there's a tree program. Because he brought all these trees to Texas, and there's literally, it's called the Kirkpatrick Tree Program.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it still exists, and there's a specific tree that he planted, I think, that he's really well known for, and I do believe it's on his property.
Wow, wow. So I wonder if, we have several horticulturalists represented here at Chestnut Square. Joseph Delaney was one, the younger Joseph Delaney, as well as one of, I think it was George Washington Taylor was a horticulturalist, and I think he was part of some of the same groups. So again, what a small town,
right?
That everybody, that you don't necessarily, I mean, horticulturalists, tree growers.
Well, we take it for granted.
Yeah.
We take for granted all the trees that we have. We're like, oh, look, pecan trees. Oh, look, mulberry tree, or persimmon tree, and we represent some of those right here at Chestnut Square. Yeah.
So it's so interesting to me. History is just, it's amazing.
Can you imagine what this meant for the families though that lived here to have these trees here at their disposal, that they could get some of these things for, that they might have had to wait to arrive on train.
Right, that might not have been fresh by the time that it arrived.
And it was called, the Kirkpatrick Historic Tree Program. And it says it was the Smith Graybell trees. And it was the story of the Smith Graybell trees that came to light, and the Kirkpatrick legacy was discovered. And so it wasn't, until a little bit down the road to know of his contributions to McKinney, to Texas.
To just the war, I mean, the probably the United States as well. But that is amazing. What an amazing man.
We do know also, aside from that, as you heard, E.W. Kirkpatrick was very involved in the Veterans Affairs. And one of the things that was held at the Kirkpatrick House was the picnics.
Yes, the picnics for the reunions of the Confederate soldiers and just soldiers. And so we have a picture here, and this is Tuck Hill. And again, he was part of the Quantrill Raiders. He was known by Frank and Jesse James. And so he was one of the McKinney residents here. And so this is him. And this is in front of the Kirkpatrick, or on the Kirkpatrick property at one of the reunions in 1910. He was Grand Marshal of, they used to have a parade. And a lot of these also took place in Finch Park. And Finch Park was bumps up against the Kirkpatrick property.
We also have one more picture. Now this is not in front. Sorry about the sunlight. This is not in front of the Kirkpatrick House. But this is just to show the size of some of these picnics of the Confederate soldiers. This is from 1928. And it says, a few of the fast thinning ranks. And so you can see, hopefully, just the size and how many would go. Because at the time, when you did join the ranks of the Civil War during that time, whatever state you were in, whatever they were fighting for, that's just what you fought for. And so, again, it's just part of our history. And like I said at the beginning, and I'm stressing again, I'm not saying this house is in danger, but let's keep the conversation opening, because with the passing of J. Crum, we're not sure where the house is going to go. Maybe it's going to be passed on to family. That's going to be great. It's been in the family for generations.
Right.
But if there's ever a chance, that it could not maybe be with the family anymore, we're hoping that wherever it goes, it's or whatever happens to it, it's preserved. We would love to be a voice
of helping that to take place, as well as the land that's around it, because the land is important, because it might house some of these important trees that he brought to life here in McKinney. And that's kind of what we're all about.
Yeah.
Chestnut Square, we're all about preserving history. We're all about sharing the stories of people of the past that were important to McKinney and Collin County and the surrounding area.
Yeah, we can learn so much from our past. And, and hopefully this is going to start the conversation. Let us know if there's a building or a structure or just a place that you know of something significant happening here in McKinney that possibly you want to bring to light, but also maybe you think might be threatened, or it's really hard to tell. Sometimes we're still discovering things, right?
Right.
And we come about, I remember not that long ago, we were concerned about a certain property on Wilson Creek. And so it's just a very, very important conversation to have amongst the community. Because the only way that voices like ours will be heard, or voices like yours is going to be heard, is to share and to take part in these conversations and to keep them going and growing.
and to just educate other people, because they might not know. And so it's important. I think history is so important, and just being able to see an original 1900s house.
Right.
How it's just so cool. And every time I walk into the buildings here, it's just, you learn something every day.
Yeah.
I've been here forever. So.
And I've driven by the Kirkpatricks. I've driven by the Elm Street Saloon as well, and I'm always like, oh.
Yeah, I wonder what happened. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I remember when I first drove by the Kirkpatrick House, I was like, oh, I love that house. But I didn't know the significance, and now that we do, it's like...
You love it even more. You love it on a different level.
Yeah, you really, really do.
Yeah.
Such an important part of history here in McKinney, here in Texas. So, let's keep these conversations going.
Yes,
let's help
definitely.
save these structures. There ever be a threat to them. Let's preserve, let's save.
And let's also share the stories of the houses. If you know of something that happened at the house, just please let us know so that we can document it for future generations.
Yeah, we would love to talk more about it. I mean, we have the opportunity. You have the opportunity to give us suggestions on what you want to hear about for our podcast. And you can just put that in our comments below.
Yep.
And, we'll jump right on it.
Exactly.
If there's one thing we love to do is research.
Oh, whoa. Rabbit hole. So thank you for joining in. Please follow us on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. Please subscribe to Historified on YouTube, and just spread the word that we're here.
Share with your friends, and we will see you all again in April.
Yes.